Okay, I'm going to call the meeting of the Gloucester School Committee to order. Today is Wednesday, July 22nd, 2020 at 7 p.m. This meeting is recorded by video and audio in accordance with the state open meeting law, consistent with the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and banning gatherings of not more than 25 people. This meeting will be conducted by remote participation. If you are calling in on a phone, you can press *9 to request to speak. If you are watching from a computer or a device, there is a raise hand button that you can tap or press to request to speak. Please use either of these options during oral communications to be recognized to speak. Maria, can you do a roll call, please?
Certainly. Ms. Watson.
Here.
Ms. Weeson.
Here.
Kathy Clancy.
Here.
Mr. Favazza.
Here.
Chairman Pope is not here tonight. Vice Chair Prince.
Here.
And Mayor Taken is not here tonight.
No, but Maria, can you note that there is a quorum for the record, please?
Sure.
Now we will stand and salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Oral communications. The public shall have the opportunity at every school committee meeting to be heard under oral communications. Oral communications shall allow any resident who has a request or complaint of any nature relative to the school committee business to appear before the school committee, state their problem without debate, and the matter may be referred to the proper subcommittee. For items that are on the agenda, members of the public may address the committee with the permission of the chair. Persons speaking under oral communications shall be limited to 3 minutes, and each shall submit a copy of their prepared communications to the recording secretary. The school committee chair shall not allow complaints as to individual performance or character. So if there's anyone here for oral communications, can you please press *9 or use the raise your hand button, probably located at the bottom of your screen. Okay, so Eric Lee, I'm going to promote you to panelist. Eric, you muted, so if you could unmute yourself and state your name and address for the record, please.
Sure. My name is Eric Lee. I am a Gloucester High School teacher in biology. I live in Rockport, but am a concerned public funding for public schools advocate as well, and proud member of the MTA. I want to thank you very much for allowing me to speak, and I noticed that you may be taking up the resolution that I presented 2 meetings before in regards to reaching out for public funding. This is not to indicate that all of you are not doing this. I know that you are, and the mayor working very hard with many different meetings with other representatives from nationally and also from the state, but it does help send a message that not only is it no longer a village to raise a child here, but now we really need not only a commonwealth, but the nation to help in the funding of this. I was trying to find the resolution, if it is what I had presented intact, and I didn't see it in the meeting notes. It said there was an asterisk next to it. Will that be provided at some time? And I thank you very much again for addressing this.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. Yes, it is in our packet tonight because I have a copy here in front of me that I will read into the record when we take this up for consideration a little bit later in the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you for your efforts. I appreciate it. Okay, is there anyone else that would like to speak? I don't see anyone else. Comments from the chairperson. Unfortunately, Jonathan Pope is homesick tonight and unable to attend. We wish him a speedy recovery. Recognitions. Are there any recognitions to come before the committee tonight? Ken? I just want to recognize the teachers, the staff, the nurses, the administrators, and all that have been involved over the past couple of weeks on the reopening plan. I can hear the scuttle around town, people talking about it and how great that it's working out and how happy people are to be able to collaborate with each other when they really haven't had that opportunity before. So I just want to recognize them for their efforts. Anyone else? No? GHS Student Advisory Council. Is anyone here from the Advisory Council? I do not see anyone. Consent agenda. So on our consent agenda, we have numerous minutes to be approved. April 8th, 2020, April 10th, April 15th. Approval of warrants, transfers, and any referrals that may be in the package. Is there anyone that would like to remove anything from the consent agenda? I'm not so quiet tonight. Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Maria, can you do a roll call vote?
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Vaza,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Prince.
Yes. Thank you. Deliberations on educational issues and the superintendent's report. Welcome, Superintendent Lemus. I believe you're going to start off with an update on the school reopening and re-entry. And we're all very eager to hear what you have to say tonight.
Great. Well, good evening, folks. Glad to be here. Glad everyone's was safe. Most of us are healthy. Best wishes to Mr. Pope for speedy recovery. And so what I'm going to do is give you an update. Really, I'm just the update on school reopening reentry is largely in my superintendent's report, but I'll sort of give you some highlights and then happy to answer questions. I will say that things are moving quickly, and so although I wrote the superintendent's report a couple days ago, there's more information since then. So I'll try to update you as well. So I want to just read the first paragraph of my report because I think it just captures something I want the whole community here. That our objective, meaning the school committee's objective and the Gloucester Public Schools objective, remains the safe return of as many students as possible to in-person school settings to maximize learning, address our students' full needs, and support family and community needs. It's very important that as we continue planning, we'll determine with the school committee whether we'll be able to have none, some, or all of our students return safely. So while we are prioritizing certainly in-person school settings, we want to make sure that those are safe, and we may have to limit how many students are in our buildings in order to be safe. We will base our decisions on guidance from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, expert advice from medical and public health authorities in the state that the department is working with, and also our local Department of Public Health, and also our ability to staff the three approaches: in-person, fully remote, and a hybrid. The top priority in planning is the health and safety of our students, their families, and all of our staff. At the same time, we all know that our students learn best, and we are able to support their mental, emotional, and social health best when they are in our schools. I want everyone to know the difficult decisions do lie ahead as we try to minimize the risk while knowing that we cannot eliminate it entirely. So we've been doing some great work in planning over the past couple weeks. We continue to move forward with our planning. Last week, all the principals and assistant principals, and then central district office staff from finance, such as education, human resources, IT, nursing, English learner education, and transportation joined us during those 2 days. They were really productive 2 days. We made a lot of forward progress, which I'll summarize in a moment. I also want to thank Joe Lucido from the Department of Public Works. He spent the afternoon with us on Thursday and was able to meet with each grade level team. So preschool, elementary school, middle school, and high school. Also, we had a district-wide school reopening team has met twice in the past 2 weeks, I guess it is. We had our second meeting just yesterday, and they provided input on the elementary planning and also our staff and family surveys, which went out today. Staff survey went out last night, and a family message and survey went out this morning. I just want to give folks an update, sort of a summary of each, by grade span. So our preschool is working, led by Director Anne-Marie Jordan. She's working with our preschool staff on the instructional approach through the remote learning working group, and also to figure out what the approach will be for preschool. We expect that to be in person with a maximum of 11 students per class. Typically, we have 15 or 16 students in each class, but we're going by both DESE recommendations and also a Department of Early Education and Care recommendations on that. We also, as you know, have a challenge because the preschool, of course, shares space with our district offices. So we have quite a bit of intermingling of our district office staff and the preschool students and personnel. And so we are going to be working on reconfiguring to some degree the offices here and changing some things around to make sure that those two groups, district office staff and preschool kids and staff, are separated as much as they possibly can be. So, but that's an important piece, especially to keep the little ones away from adults away from adults outside their teachers as much as possible, and really keep that a very contained bubble. Our elementary schools I'll talk about elementary, middle, and high school, and want to just emphasize that at this point, they are prioritizing a certain approach. We have to plan for all three approaches: in-person, remote, and hybrid, but putting quite a bit of effort into the one we think is most likely at this point. I do want to stress to both the committee, but also all the public, that we don't have plans yet. We don't have decisions yet, okay? This is a work in progress that is changing literally every day. So I don't want folks to react and think that this is a done deal, things are decided, because they're really not. I just have to be honest with you on that one. We're getting more and more updates from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, literally almost day by day, certainly every few days. And I'll share some of those with you in a moment. But just want to stress that this is a work in progress. It's an update on where we are right now. So at this point, the elementary schools are prioritizing in-person return, and they're working on figuring out the operational, safety, and health considerations to get that done. This is getting into details about how many, how desks are placed, whether we need plexiglass shields, how can we do lunch, and actually that's turning out to be one of the most complex pieces, because when kids are eating lunch, they've got to be 6 feet apart without masks, and that's very challenging in our schools, especially because many of our cafeterias, whether it's furniture or spacing, is quite limited. They're also working with the 3-foot threshold on safety protocols that DESE has put out. I want to be clear about this, is that with the 3-foot threshold that the department has put out, that is 3-foot threshold with other safety precautions. So masks, washing hands, keeping bubbles and cohorts small. So we are moving forward and planning for a 3-foot threshold, especially in the younger grades. It's where it seems to be at this point, from the guidance from public health officials and education officials, more doable. But there are many, many answers yet to come on elementary, but at this point, they're really zeroing in and trying to figure out how they can do in person. Middle school is a little bit different. It's different in lots of ways. They're really trying to limit the cohort or bubble size. At this point, they're prioritizing a hybrid approach, but also looking into the in-person approach as well. They may possibly get a 5-day schedule. They're on a 6-day rotation right now, but a 5-day schedule would be simpler and would be allow for maybe a shorter day that would allow for teacher planning and remote learning support as well. I will say, whether it's at the high school or the middle school, the hybrid approach on staffing does seem to be the most complicated. We have to figure out how we can both, when kids are in school, we know how to staff that. But when they're at the same time, the kids would be in school in a hybrid model, you also would have kids out of school doing remote learning. And how do we have our teachers provide for both? And it's very, very complicated and onerous for them to be doing both things. In fact, we have to figure out how it can be done, either with groups of teachers, sharing responsibilities, or how we actually provide remote learning while teachers are also teaching class. That is probably one of the most difficult challenges, not only Gloucester, but really across the Commonwealth folks are dealing with. In terms of the middle school, there are some logistical challenges, figuring out how many specials to offer, how to space students, and also how to make sure that kids are keeping appropriate distances. The high school is similar, but they actually have a more complex schedule. They are looking at they're prioritizing a hybrid approach at this point as well. And we're trying to figure out, they're really working on how do they limit sort of in-person contacts. And it may be that the best way to do that is by having a hybrid approach where you have fewer kids in the building at any one time. And you may be doing it 9th and 10th 2 days a week, 11th and 12th, a different 2 days a week. And that allows you to spread kids out within classrooms, but across the building. But that's something, again, they're taking on really, in some ways, the most complicated approach first in order to figure out how to get that done. The hybrid approach at the high school also really takes into account the guidance that older students are more likely than younger students to transmit the virus to others. So it's really important when we have kids in our buildings at the upper grades that we are very, very conscious and acting, with accordance of all the safety protocols, including masks, and that we space kids as much as possible. Let me just add 2 more things, then I'll just pause to see if there are some questions from the committee. Our high needs students at this point, whether it's special education students or English language learners, or those who need additional emotional or social mental health support, we are looking at how do we have those students who need extra support in our schools all 5 days, if that's possible. We want to prioritize their in-school learning if we can, and we hope to do so. And then the last piece is just this idea of bubbles or cohorts. How do we limit the number of students any one student or any group of students is interacting with? Really thinking about the classroom level in elementary, but working hard to see how we can limit that at the middle school or high school. As you know, middle school and high school, they have a lot of changes. That's the way we program middle schools and high schools. Sorry, 1 second. The electric lights are trying to save electricity, which I support, except for when they go dark on me. So really how to limit that. More complicated at the high school, that could be through hybrid approach. We limit the number of students and limit the cohorts. It could be by perhaps limiting some program choices, but both the high school and middle school are looking into that. And really, I'd say working hard on it. It's one of the bigger challenges we have. So let me just pause there to see if you have any questions or clarifications on what I've said already.
Does anyone have any questions? Sam and then Laura.
Thank you for that detailed report. I'm sure that the work that's going into it is super complicated and definitely time consuming, but we appreciate it. One question that I've heard a lot of parents ask is whether or not there will be any thought or priority to making sure that siblings are on the same sort of rotating schedule. So, whether or not that's, some of them are in, will the middle school and the high school have the same sort of rotating schedule, and, will siblings be able to go the same day and be home the same day? I know that that's probably not, you probably don't have a quick answer to that, but just something that parents seem to be thinking a lot about.
It's definitely on our radar. And, at this point, because the conversations, we've been talking in groups, and sharing a lot of things, but we've been thinking about it more in terms of within a school. Of course, you raised a very important piece of also thinking across schools as well. So I'm writing that down. I'm sure Greg Bach is writing that down. That's very helpful. Thank you.
I have one other quick question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And I don't know if this is something that you'll touch on at a later time, but at some point, could you maybe update us on what the DPW is doing to sort of make sure that our HVAC systems are sort of updated and serviced? I'm just sort of curious where that stands.
Yep, I was going to share that later, but let me do it right now because you asked. So we met with Mike Hale on Monday, and a couple things. Just first of all, filters. and cleaning the air. Filters were replaced in February. They were replaced again. This is across the whole district, all schools, okay? Replaced in February, then again in the middle of March after schools had closed down, and they'll be changed again before school starts. So that's, those we are solid on. The other real question is the air exchange. And so, the air has been tested in our schools many times over the past number of years. I don't know all the history there. So we're not really worried about the quality of the air. We are worried about the exchange. And in talking to Karen Carrillo, Department of Public Health, and Mr. Hale, that's the sort of the, for us anyway, the crucial piece. And so we'll be looking in how to get that tested, how to get those numbers on exchange, and then see what we have to do there. That is an important area and issue that a lot of folks are concerned about, and of course, so are we.
When you say air exchange, do you mean sort of recycled air versus fresh air, or just how often?
Sure. I think of it as air in, air out. I should not comment any more on that because I don't know that much about it. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. We think of air in, air out type of thing. Yeah. Yeah. You've sort of got the full extent of my knowledge.
I'm sorry.
Laura?
Hi there. So thank you for all that. A couple of questions. At this point, to my knowledge, kindergartners have not yet been sort of brought into the system and evaluated to go into kindergarten. So just wondering, in the midst of all this, where that stands, and when and how you're planning for kindergartners to be evaluated.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's what I can have. Yeah, I can wait and listen.
So yeah, let's do one at a time, because otherwise I'll get confused. It'll be embarrassing. So in terms of kindergarten screening, we expect to do that the first week of school. When school, I should say, the first week we're back, when likely students won't be back. Okay. One of the things we're considering, and I'll say this now, is and actually the state is considering, is flexibility on the number of days in the year. Okay, as you know, 180 going down to 175 or 170 or 177, that sort of thing. And we are planning for and expecting that the week of August 31st would not be a school week. Okay, as we're planning for, we're looking into it. It's not a decision. I'm not announcing that right now, but if that's the case, that is when we do screening.
Okay, thank you. Just another question I hear around town, or thing has there been, do you know if there has been any increase in applications to homeschool, or what are you seeing in that space?
I know I haven't asked that recently in terms of our folks, so we can get back to you on that. I do know that districts are reporting that's happening, but I don't know the numbers here specifically. So, but we'll look into that and give it and tell you on our next update.
Okay, and just my last thing, which you very, very, I think, appropriately cautioned on. So the 3-foot distance that is being considered for elementary, is that just because of space considerations in the buildings, or is that, I mean, that seems like a very small distance. So I'm just wondering, I know that's not final. I know that that's just in process now, but just wondering, since that's on the low end of distances that are recommended, where that's coming from.
Yeah. So, I think one of the key questions that the school committee and myself and our staff really have to really wrestle with and come to a very clear answer on, okay, is which guidance we're going to follow, okay? And we are operating right now based on the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education's guidance. That guidance is created with, as you may know, with the American Academy of Pediatricians, scientists and health experts and medical experts that have been working with the state all the way through. One of the reasons that I think it's, and we'll get more information on those studies, and Desi's helping us with just being able to communicate better about this. But one of the things I think is really important to look at is how well the state has done to date, okay? And because of the guidance we've gotten from the state, not only the governor, but also Department of Education and other departments, okay, our Department of Public Health as well, because of that very good guidance, and because our citizens particularly in Gloucester as well, have done a great job following that guidance, working together in that way. Massachusetts is the, the leader, if not, one of the leaders, if not the leader in the nation. Okay. And so I really believe, and I think we all really need to work with is the same thing happens here. They're giving us good guidance. Okay. It's guidance that is backed up by recent science and the science that's developing. Okay. More and more people are coming to this. It will be very hard for us. In fact, almost impossible if we change our sources time and time again, back and forth, depending on the latest information. So we have gone from the beginning across the state, and I think in Gloucester, based on state guidance. We don't see a reason at this point to change from that. And the other thing is, that's very, very important, in talking to the Department of Public Health just this week, is we all fear becoming, Florida or Texas, Arizona. Okay, that is out there. Massachusetts isn't there, it's not on a path to that. And things will change. And so we all of us have to prepare for when things change. So we don't go far down that road, but we can pull back, adjust, go to hybrid, go to remote, that sort of thing, and stop if we start down a certain path. So that's the guidance we're following. We will continue to follow that until told otherwise. And really, really want to highlight the notion of being prepared to pull back, and whether that's in our community, but also in the schools, so we don't, when there are cases, we know exactly what to do, both in the moment with those, to take care of those people, but also more broadly, whether that's a class, a school, or the system. I hope that's helpful.
That's very, very helpful. Thank you.
Yep. I see Kathy.
Kathy, sorry, I was on mute. Go ahead, Kathy.
Thank you. So I have some specific questions about schedules and things like that, but I have a feeling it's probably too early to ask you some of those specific, because they haven't been fleshed out, right?
Yeah, schedules specifically haven't been, start and end times haven't been, and those they may vary depending on the approach. They may actually vary depending on the school level as well. So
right. Like because if will classes be reduced? How do kids deal with their changing schedule, particularly at the high school and all that? So I'll wait for 2 weeks to hear about that.
Right.
I asked this a couple weeks ago also about parent involvement, and I know you've been working really hard with all the teachers, and the survey came out today, which I completed, but I'm just wondering when a back and forth with parents, or I don't know if it's, I assume the surveys have given plenty of information with which you are operating, and the questions today help you refine what parents are thinking? Is that how it's working?
It'll help us refine some things, get a sense of where people are at this point with the information everyone has. In terms of outreach to parents, what I haven't yet done is get a list of PTO leaders. If PTO leaders are listening, they're welcome to contact me. But the reason I say is because there are a couple of things I'd like to do, or a number of things. One is meet with all the PTO leaders as a first step, and then through them, perhaps maybe school-based forums. These are obviously all on Zoom. Reach out to CPAC as well. I have our CPAC leaders' contact information, and we'll be sending an email shortly. And so those also working. I'm meeting with Chris Castle tomorrow about our EL families. As I told you in email, the survey is being translated, but also we do know that when she reached out directly to our EL families in the spring, that produced a better response, in terms of interaction and connecting with folks. So we're going to have her, I'm going to ask her tomorrow to reach out directly about the survey, but also talk through with her, other ways we can set up forums where we can meet with families and what's the best way to do that. So especially reaching out to some of our families that may not, just automatically chime in or, pursue, giving input. I'm also open to other ideas and other groups and that sort of thing. But the question we were literally sort of grappling with today is, do we get that input prior to or after in response? That sort of thing. And so it may be a scheduling thing, but we'll schedule those as soon as we can, and it may actually just come down to scheduling in terms of when we actually get that. But the sooner the better, I think. But we'll be reaching out to those groups in the next couple of days and hopefully scheduling those both across the school community, but also within school communities.
Does anyone else have any questions? Ben, can you tell me when the survey results are due in, and what is the time frame for analyzing that before you submit our plan, plan?
Sure.
The
So
Board of
let me
Education.
answer that first by talking about the plans and their due dates. July 31st, so that's a week from Friday, I believe. It still is, yep. We have a submission to the state that is a very basic summary of the three approaches. It's literally 2 pages long, okay? And that's sort of giving the commissioner and his staff a sense of where everybody is. The real submission is due August 10th. So in terms of, we will be getting the surveys back by next Wednesday, so they'll be out for a week. And so that will give us some sense prior to the July 31st submission if we're on the right track. But it would really impact the August 10th submission, that sort of thing. And that's why we also want to reach out to families in other ways as well, as soon as we can.
Okay, I know our regular scheduled meeting in August is the 12th, so I'm assuming we're going to have a meeting prior to that.
Yeah, I may not have, I don't think Jonathan and I talked about this, but I was thinking August 5th,
Yeah.
which is 2 weeks from today.
Okay. We all received guidelines from MASC in the mail talking about what the school committee's role is in all this.
Yep.
And one of the suggestions is that the school committee approves the plans before you submit them. So that's just something we'll have to do before the 12th,
Yeah,
so we will have to have a next meeting.
Yeah, so the 5th would be good.
Great.
The 9th, which is a Sunday, would be better, but you probably don't want to have a meeting on a Sunday. No, if we can schedule a meeting for the 5th, I think that's when we would hope to present to all of you,
Okay.
the plan as it stands at that point.
Okay, great. Thanks. I don't see any more questions, so we'd like to continue.
Great. So I mentioned we talked about the surveys. We also released today in those two, in the staff and the family surveys, the results from in our communications to staff and families over the yesterday and today. We also released survey results from the June surveys and highlighted. I don't have those with me right now, but highlighted a number of things, both strengths and also challenges. So that we laid out. It looked like engagement was quite strong. The ability to get information and get access was quite strong. There was some real good feedback on level of communication, or sort of complexity of communication. How do parents and families actually find out what they need to do and what they need to know? So we're working on whether it's through learning platforms, really remote learning platforms, that can help that communication. Another piece on that we're working on in terms of the remote learning for the fall is really making much clearer schedules. So students actually have schedules every day that mimic or are similar to what a typical school schedule would be like, rather than sort of more free form than it was really all over the state in the springtime. So those are just working on that. Just quickly about facilities, mentioned meeting with DPW. A couple important things is that we will be, the DPW is going to be helping us set up classrooms and also move furniture. In terms of spacing in our classrooms, we'll be having to take out extra furniture from our rooms. That could be everything from bookshelves, rugs, extra tables. We also may need to move desks in. We are looking for extra unneeded furniture, whether that might be exist at the middle school, or we want to reach out to St. Anne's as well. And so DPW has said they will help us with all of that, which is really, really great. We also they'll be installing plexi or tempered glass partitions for school, things like school secretaries, guidance, and we'll be looking into partitions to help separate sort of related service providers as well, to give them a little bit of more additional protection. I think the last piece is just, you'll see there the safety equipment we have on hand, that tens of thousands of disposable masks, both for children and for adults, thousands of disposable gowns for nurses to use, gloves, N95 masks as well. We're looking into and pursuing hand-mounted hand sanitizer dispensers in all classrooms and common areas. Those would be essentially reloaded every week. Also spray bottles for classrooms that would be used to sanitize and clean surfaces. And then lots and lots of hand sanitizer to serve as a backup to all that. We're also looking in terms of, as we get going, closer to school, from when we're doing professional development for teachers, is working with, trying to sign up with Leahy to provide mental health and self-care training to our staff before school opens. And then technology, just a couple updates here. We submitted for another technology grant just, I think, yesterday. That's to the tune of about $200,000. I believe, looking for my notes here. Yeah, $200,000. That would be for Chromebooks and hotspots. We're hoping to have one-to-one, essentially, grades 3 through 12, with additional ones available for younger grades. And then there's another grant coming up from DESE for about $700,000 from the COVID Relief Fund, which is part of the CARES Act. That's a formula grant that needs to be committed or encumbered by December 30th. We are trying to get clarity on whether that allows us to spend that on staffing or not. Because we would like to have, whether it's building subs or nurse substitutes, or perhaps extra paraprofessionals or aides, likely to need all of those in some capacity. That's part of our planning to figure out exactly what we would need. And I think the last piece I want to update folks on, just a couple further things on DESE. We had a call with the commissioner today, and there's a lot of guidance coming out in the next 24 or 48 hours. Guidance on transportation, guidance on facilities, guidance on electives and specialist classes. Remote learning guidance is coming out next week. They expect to have some clearer guidelines and expectations for remote learning. We're also getting guidance on licensure flexibility. So all those things we're expecting in writing. We got a sort of a verbal update on some of those today, and expecting to get in hard copy everything from tonight and over the next week. So that's going to shape our planning as well. Let me just stop there. That's really the update on school reopening and reentry at this point. Anything else? Any other questions at this time?
Does anyone have any questions? No. Okay, great work. Lots getting done.
Great, a lot is getting done.
Surprisingly.
A lot is happening. Great.
Keep the
So
faith.
then, should I just go ahead and complete the rest of the report?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Okay, great. Just a few things. I'll give you an update. At the Budget and Finance Subcommittee, I gave, all of you were there, in fact, I believe, a presentation about, really the Veterans East Gloucester project and what the paths we have to go down if the funding vote doesn't pass later this year. I'll give some of that later during the Building and Finance Subcommittee report, just so not only you folks can see it, but also other folks the many people who are watching us who weren't at the B&F subcommittee meeting can see some of that presentation. We are also going to be working with the City Council on the language for the ballot in the coming week or so, and still waiting for the legislature to finalize or finish voting on the Article 97 flexibility or variance. So that's all coming. The last piece is just an update on I will update you constantly on these three areas, which we're talking about tonight, which is obviously opening school, the East Gloucester Veterans Project, and improving our facilities district-wide. And then the last piece, getting to know Gloucester and our school community. So just want to give you a quick update on what I've been doing on that front lately. I continue my efforts to meet community, city, department, school leaders, and staff. Since 2 weeks ago, I've completed all my individual meetings with all the principals, all the school committee members, yourselves. I met Mayor Dakin last week. We also met with all our administrators one-on-one. I'm beginning to meet with city department heads. So I met with Mike Hale and Karen Curlow. I'm meeting with Fire Chief Smith and Police Chief Conley tomorrow. I'm also going to be meeting with Lieutenant Michael Gossam, who oversees our school resource officer program next week. And now branching out into community service agencies and local community leaders. So meeting with the head of the Chamber of Commerce, of Wellspring House, of also Children's Friend and Family Services. Those meetings are scheduled for the next week or so. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we're now starting to reach out to parent groups and parent leaders as well. So those are just, that's what's happened in the past 2 weeks and happening in the upcoming week, and there'll be more to come. But what I'm going to present to you in August is just the plan for what we call entry plan. So all these meetings are helping me, understand more about Gloucester and the school community. Those and other meetings I'll have throughout the next 6 months or so will help me, put together my entry plan. But I'll give you more details about what that's going to entail at our next meeting. So that's the report for tonight. Any other questions or things I can help with?
Lara?
I don't know if this is for now or for another point, but I know that there was a letter from the GTA in our packet.
Oh, yeah.
And I wanted to know where we were on that.
Great, thank you. Yes, thank you I mentioned that in the report, but did not say it verbally. So yes, GTA has given us a demand to bargain and also an information request. They're one and the same. They're the same document. The information request is very extensive. It includes 22 separate requests to provide information and 68 separate questions. So most of that is going to be included in our plans as we develop them. Cynthia Carney and I have been in regular contact on the phone recently, but also we're meeting tomorrow just to begin to talk through some of this. She's also on our district-wide reopening team, and so she's really trying to keep her very much in the loop on our progress. But we'll talk more about just how to proceed in our approaches. Really have an informal conversation tomorrow. And hopefully get an understanding of how to proceed on bargaining. Of course, all of you will be involved, or some of you will be involved in that. My hope and intention is really for us to, put together most, if not all, of a plan, and then and have that as part of negotiations. And really, what do we see as we're planning is best to do and is doable, and then at the same time, also work forward with the GTA to make sure that because so much of what we're doing is falls under a bargainable activity. So but really want to move forward together on that, and that's really we don't have any formal proposals from them at this point. I think that'll happen as we move forward in the planning process.
Any other questions? Is there a motion to accept the superintendent's report?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Ray, can you do a roll call vote?
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Prince.
Yes. Okay, moving on to subcommittee reports. The Building and Finance Subcommittee met on July 15, 2020. Kathy, do you want to give us the update?
Yes. So we met, and Gary was unable to attend tonight, and he had told me ahead of time that he wasn't able to come to due to a family matter. So he will not be able to help expand on some of this. But the first item was a fiscal year 20 budget report update, and he reported that we ended the year with a balance of $76,409, which will, as all the books are closed, that will transfer back over to the city and be incorporated into free cash. We made approximately $1.2 million prepay for special education for out of district, which is allowed by legislation. So hopefully that will help us have a little financial security as we move into this year. And knowing that that's, one of those things that gives us a little bit of a contingency safety net. We also went over COVID-related expenses and how those were being funded and all that. Everything seems to be well tracked and categorized and submitted appropriately with the city, or in particular the Department of Ed, wherever the funding is coming. DPW open and closed tickets. There's not a lot of activity in the building, so the DPW has been clearing through almost every open ticket. So there's very few open tickets. And as Superintendent Lummis said, they're all over the reopening plan and all of that. So, and my news reports is that the MSBA project for the field house at the high school is moving along quite well. So, so that's a really nice bright spot for our kids to come back to, and hopefully they'll be able to physically be in there and use that in some capacity. Let's see. I think the big item we talked about was the East Gloucester Veterans presentation by Ben, and I would hope he'd be able to take care of expanding on that here, because I think there was so much really concise information as to if the vote fails, and I think it's really important that that we just continue putting that information out there, because it's been out there for a very, very long time, starting with the Mount Vernon report in the 2000s and the Dorian Whittier report, and it led to the decision we made to pursue the school building that we are. So, but I still think it bears plenty of repeating, given how important this vote is.
So Kathy, would it be helpful if I just showed some of those slides right now? Great.
Yes, it would. Yeah.
Great. Just want to make sure I can share my screen. Marie, if you're there, that's something that I can do.
You're a co-host, so I think you should be able to do that.
Okay.
Just while he's getting this set up, and sorry if I'm breaking up through this, I think we should probably let people who are watching know that if the answers to any questions aren't in tonight's discussion, which may or may not be abbreviated, the BNF video is up on the city's website, and they can see the full presentation there also, right?
Yes, that is very helpful. Hold on. I just want to make sure that can't.
Should be down the bottom of your screen.
No, what it's not showing me is the preview of which window. So I'm
okay.
likely to show a window that, let me try this. Hold on. Well, a second.
Probably 45 minutes.
No, I can't. Shoot.
Grant, are you there? Should he be able to share if he's a co-host?
No, what it says, it's telling me to quit Zoom so I can share. So I'm sorry about this. Didn't know this was going to happen. Let me quit and
Don't
come
quit
back.
Zoom.
Wait, is that Greg? I mean, Grant?
Don't
No, that was me.
don't quit leaving the meeting. You should be able to. Are you trying to view the document in the browser?
It's preview. It's a PDF.
You should just be able to open that natively on the desktop and then share that window.
No, what it's done this a million times. It's not actually letting me. Oh, now it's going. Now I got it.
Okay.
It wasn't showing me the preview, so I couldn't. Here we go. We got it.
Perfect.
So you see slides now? All right.
Yes,
Beautiful.
we do.
Okay. Excellent. Let me just do one. Okay. Okay. So, great. Here we go. And are you seeing one slide at a time? What are you seeing?
We
We
see
see
one slide, but then we see the slides on the side. So
1 second.
now it's changing.
Yep.
It has to do with the fact you've got 3 monitors going.
Hey. Thank you, Grant. 1 second. It literally is falling off my screen. Grant, where are you when I need you? Give me a moment, folks. Sorry about this. I'm going to end screen sharing here. I'm going to find this file. Grant, if I have lost the file, it's somewhere between the 3 screens. What do you suggest?
Well, I'm remoting into the VPN right now. I'm going to see if I can hop on your machine and see if I can find it for you. 1 minute.
Thank you. Sorry about this. I got it. Okay. Oh my God. All right, you see slides? Okay, I'm gonna stop moving things around here. Okay, so I'm just gonna go through all these. I'll hit some of the really important ones. So first of all, just to sort of put it in very clear terms, a failed school vote. This is if Gloucester does not support the funding for the East Gloucester Veterans Project, there are likely 2 paths, okay? Neither of which are very good for the community, for our children, for our families. One would be restart from the beginning with MSBA. That's the Massachusetts School Building Authority. One would be turning our backs on a new modern school and attempt to maintain 2 substandard buildings, East Gloucester and Veterans, but really also struggle to maintain all 4 of our elementary schools because it's all connected. I won't talk really about Plum Cove and Beaman tonight. I'll focus on these 2 schools, but really what everyone has to understand is, I'll explain in a moment, is delaying or not addressing East Gloucester and Veterans makes it much harder for us to address the deficiencies that also exist at Beaman and Plum Cove. So we're going to start on the first not great option, which is restart from the beginning with MSBA. So as it says here in the green, a failed vote by the citizens here in Gloucester will likely result in the school district being required to submit a new statement of interest to the MSBA and await invitation from the MSBA to enter the eligibility period. This is something that really would send us back to actually before February 2017, because we applied for, we submitted this statement of interest back then, and were approved here. The challenge on this is submitting the new statement of interest, which is going back to the beginning, is we would again compete with nearly 100 or so other proposals just to get into the eligibility phase. We've already been through this. We had to compete with 90 other proposals, and Gloucester came out, successful in that. And that's when we started back in 2017. So in addition to that, we would force us to spend additional dollars redoing studies and design work that we've already done. And the timeline then, in terms of being in the eligibility phase, doesn't even begin if we get into it, okay, into 2022. So there's no possibility of the completion of a new school, any MSBA project, until 2027. And the red note here is really, really important, because 2027 is like the absolute best case scenario if everything went our way. And these projects, they never always go your way, okay? So this really would be, again, going back to the starting line with another project. Who knows what that project would be? The community would have to decide if it was going to be East Gloucester's and veterans. It really would throw us back, at least 7 years, and most likely longer than that. Even up to 10 or more. So that's not really. The other piece on this restarting from the beginning is there are real cost issues. Okay, delaying any project these days, gets you involved in escalation. Whether that's and here I've used a very, very conservative estimate of 5% per year for escalation. As folks know, recently we've had 12% annual escalation, 8% annual escalation. It really has been averaging 10% escalation for construction costs over the past, 5 years or so. So even at a very conservative 5% escalation rate per year, even at the best possible time frame, 2027, you're talking, at least a $20 million increase for doing the same project. So we're losing a lot of time. We're also, would expend a lot more money as well if we went on this path. Which I hesitate to call it a path. It's really more of a problem, actually. Number 2 here is attempt to maintain 2 failing buildings. I won't go blow by blow on what I did last week with BNF about all the substandard facilities, the inadequate systems, the health, safety, and accessibility issues, and the inferior working conditions for the staff in the buildings. But they are really, really significant. In terms of just whether it's, the river runs through it in the basement of East Gloucester, to some of our most vulnerable learners learning in the hallways, whether that's English language support or special education support. There are risks in terms of civil rights risks on that, civil rights lawsuits perhaps. But then there's also just failing systems, very old systems in terms of heating and electricity and plumbing, that sort of thing. There's also accessibility issues in terms of folks with disabilities actually getting into the buildings and getting out of the buildings, getting access to specific rooms. It goes on and on. I won't go through all the different slides here in details. The modulars are past their years of use at both schools, as they are at Beaman and Plum Cove. We have roof leaks. I will say that what's very important is, the DPW has been doing a really, really remarkable job, especially over the last, 5 or 6, 7 years, of keeping these places running. This is not for lack of effort, not for lack of high quality work. These are old buildings, and buildings have a lifespan. It's sort of like my car. At this point, I'm spending, $1,000 or so every 6 months on my car. At some point, I got to give it up and get a new car, hopefully better gas mileage. At some point, our cars aren't, in good enough shape to keep. And the same thing with any buildings. Despite how well they're maintained or how well they're kept up, or changes you make, upgrades you make, at some point things get too old and get out of date. And we're really facing that, not only with these 2 buildings, but also Beaman and Plum Cove. So again, I won't go through all of these, but whether it's, our kitchens are very small. They can be dangerous for food service workers. Our buildings don't have dedicated art rooms, and that's an essential piece, or music often. That well-rounded education is essential to all our learners these days. Gloucester students really, they deserve those programs. They deserve, a well-rounded education. And also our staff, really deserves high quality, workspaces, because our teachers' working conditions are our students' learning conditions. So again, health and safety, accessibility. The challenge with doing this is there's really sort of two possibilities here. There are capital improvements to major systems just to keep things like the roof and the heating and the plumbing, actually running and operational, technology, that sort of stuff. We could pay for capital improvements to major systems. We could also pay for renovations, but with no additions. And I just want to look at some basic costs to both of these paths here. Looking at capital improvements to major systems, we would have to upgrade major systems in the next 10 years for both of these schools because they're out of date and needing repair regularly. That would not allow us that would not include any improvement in physical space. That would not upgrade the spaces for special education or English language learners or occupational therapy, folks that we're really obligated by law to provide. It wouldn't increase programming for art or music. The gym and cafeteria would remain substandard and small, and does not include the replacement cost of modular classrooms, which are really at this point all 4 of our elementary schools reaching their viable lifetime. Just for doing capital improvements to major systems. Dormwood here projected $18 million for East Gloucester. It's reasonable to assume that there'd be a similar upgrade necessary and cost at veterans as well. For a total of $36 million, take up to 10 years to maintain this. And there's no reimbursement from MSBA on this at all for these programs. For these typically we have to apply to them and maybe get some that's competitive as well. But really what we're getting at here is 10 years in, tens of millions of dollars in, and we have the same buildings with the same challenges in terms of learning 10 years later. So that's a very, very difficult road to consider going down. The other approach is renovations with no additions. These would be also very expensive. You upgrade the building systems like in the previous. You would expand learning spaces for special education and create meeting spaces for small group learning. You could create dedicated art and music spaces, but it's only very limited changes and minimal space and program improvements. Gyms and cafeteria, which are often are the same spaces in our buildings, will be made the same. The modular classrooms in this example aren't touched or improved. They are maintained, even though they have to be replaced between now and then. So that's additional cost. And our classrooms remain undersized. So again, not a great option. And this is a particularly costly option. Again, the upgrades and renovations like these limited renovations would be upwards of $30 million East Gloucester. It's fair to assume similar at veterans. That's before escalation. This would take again, in the 10-year neighborhood. At that point, we spent over $60 million that we're not sure where we get it from. Likely no reimbursement from MSBA. And at that point, we have buildings that remain substandard, but we've sunk a lot of our taxpayer dollars into them anyway. And I think I've got one more slide here, I believe. Guess not. So if you compare that with, at this point, it's $67 million in today's dollars for a brand new facility that supports, 40%, I think of it. Yeah, 40% or so of our, at that point, between West Parish and the new building at Veterans East Gloucester, 60% of our, or more actually, of our elementary students are in, new facilities, new top-notch modern facilities that are great for learning, great for teaching, that help our students, obviously, our youth, but also help our whole community. So one of the things that we need to really grapple with, the community needs to grapple with is, is the what if here. And unfortunately, the what if isn't all that great. It's costly. It doesn't get us where we want to be. It really sort of interrupts and prolongs turning our eyes towards Beaman and Plum Cove. And we are stuck with the same, old and out-of-date buildings after expending.
Can I just stop you right there? Sam has a question.
Sure.
I don't see her on my screen, but I see her hand up. Sam, did you want to ask a question?
No, Ben, you can finish. I just had a comment to
Okay.
Sure. No, I was just wrapping up just to say that we really need to make sure we're clear about what the choices are here and what we'd really be facing if we're not able to proceed with the new building that everyone has, so many folks have worked on for many years to get us to this point.
Go ahead, Sam.
So the one thing that I've been thinking a lot about, and, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
I've heard this argument that, if we can keep up our homes, then we should be able to keep up our schools. But the thing that is really important for us to, as a community, to keep in mind is that the way that we use our homes hasn't changed, right? We live in them, families live in them, they're designed to be lived in by families or individuals. Our schools built in the 1940s, I think it would be very interesting for us to know how many staff were in the buildings when they were built, how many students were in those buildings when they were built, and to really think about how much education has changed from the 1940s until today. And even if we were to update all of our systems, the reality is that they're still not best suited for 21st century learning. And that really, I think, is important for people to understand, because this argument that we can renovate is really a moot point, because we can't fit in those buildings. The way that we educate our kids today versus the 1940s is completely different. And so, yes, we could just update, our heating systems and try to make the best out of it, but our kids still wouldn't be getting the best education. And so I think it's really important for us to continue going back to that the reason why we're doing this is because the kids need more space, and they need, an educational space that's suited for the 21st century, not for the 1940s.
Yeah.
So I don't know if anybody can get that information about how many staff were employed at East Gloucester when it was built. I can't imagine that it's anywhere near how many staff we have now. But it's just something to think about.
I think it's a very well point. It's an important point, well made. That's about. It's on many levels. One level is just what we know is best for student learning in terms of working together, not being in rows, literally, okay, but working together, collaborating, that type of work. What we know about the type of support that English language learners need, especially students with special needs, not only need, also required. I mean, there have been big changes in what's expected of our schools over the last, 20, 30 years. And as you said, the school itself hasn't changed. The school, as we build new schools, people see that they're quite a bit changed. There's more areas for collaboration. There's more areas for technology. There's more areas for performance and exhibition, because we know that those things, when kids get involved, they learn more deeply and better. But there's also the support spaces. There's the meeting spaces that you have to have both for teacher collaboration, but also very importantly for meeting with parents, especially parents with special needs students. So those are all things that didn't exist, as you said, when these buildings were made, and it does make a lot of sense to be able to show people, help people understand how it's different now, and then it used to be, and how it's better with those changes. And the other piece is, just in terms of wear and tear. The wear and tear on any public building, especially a school, is certainly different than most of our houses. In terms of the number of people, the amount of upkeep, the amount of wear and tear is categorically different than a residence. And so there is, it's difficult to keep schools in great shape. And folks have been doing a great effort over the last number of years, but at some point, yeah, it may be time to look for something different and new.
Ben, it would also be interesting to add to these slides or to the conversation at some point, with the projected cost that you have there for the work that's being done. My guess is that this work at both schools would trigger the code of mass regulations, where when you put 30% of the value into the building, you have to bring the whole building up to code. So it's not like you can just go in and cherry pick what you want to do. If a certain percentage of money is spent, then guess what? You have to bring the whole building up to code too, which would probably increase these numbers a lot more.
Yeah.
We learned that when we were doing the West Parish and we were talking about Fuller, and we had the building inspector come in saying, these aren't MSBA rules, they're Massachusetts rules that we would be required to follow. So that conversation should go hand in hand with this, because I'm sure these figures don't reflect the fact that we would have to, we'd be mandated to make the schools bigger, not just decide what we want to fix.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And that's, everything from, accessibility code, fire, plumbing, but also you get a certain threshold, you're talking about seismic code, okay, which is something that, none of these buildings were built for. And that's about bracing, that's about reinforcing, that's actually about, rebuilding foundations and that sort of thing. And that's very, very expensive. But you're exactly right about the triggers of, the percent of the value of the building or percent of square footage being renovated, and you trigger those. And you're exactly right that they're costly and likely add to these. So, Yep.
Does anyone have any questions or any more comments? I mean, there's a lot of comments I'm sure can go with this presentation. But does anyone want to add anything? Kathy?
I just want to add also that I know Principal Pasquarello and Principal Fusco were on our call on last week, but no one has really highlighted the heating system issues, I think, publicly. I know before West Parish was built, they were without heat for, I think, 3 days maybe in the winter time. And, we've heard from the East Gloucester staff and principal that this past year, they had days where it was 90 and other days where it was in the 50s. And so the risk is not just, the exposure risk of where we're educating our kids, but there are very real facility risks to being able to have our kids be able to come to school. So it's just one of those things that tell you that the building is, over 70 years old. I mean, that's a long time for a school. Long time.
I'm trying to stop sharing because you're still seeing the slide, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I really have been on Zoom for most of the last 5 months, although you couldn't tell. All right. If you folks keep talking, I'll figure out how to stop sharing. I promise.
So another thing to point out is in the first slide, when we're discussing maybe MSBA would pick us again, and you'd have to question why would MSBA select us for a project a couple of years down the road when the Gloucester community has been informed that the East Gloucester School is one of the worst in Massachusetts, and we were given an opportunity and then we lost it through voting. Would they even want to select us for that same project? And then keep in mind that MSBA may not be selecting any projects over the next couple of years because of the current situation with COVID and the revenues that are going to go down over the next couple of years too. So, I mean, wishing and hoping for 2027, you're probably talking about 2037 for MSBA to consider us again.
I think, I agree with that. You're getting, there are variables on top of variables here. And then when you're talking about a project of this size that would have this sort of positive impact on the community, it's really, to get this far down the path and turn away from it would be really damaging to our schools, our community. Absolutely.
Yep. Joel?
And I think if I can just add to it, So certainly, one of the things that I get stopped at the supermarket a lot or on the street about, and I understand why, is the idea that this override is in some way a referendum on decisions that were made previously by this body or previous iterations of it. And, so Melissa at the BNF, asked me to repeat my thought, which is, the best outcome for the city is for this school to get built as it's proposed. Do I wish there was like alternatives that had come in? Sure, I'm one of those people, but I know that going forward, I can't go and get in a time machine and change a decision made in 2012, right? The decision is made, and going against the override or trying to stop this project doesn't fix a decision in the past that someone may have disagreed with. And it doesn't, it's not like the school committee gets punished for a previous mistake. You're punishing the kids, you're punishing the taxpayers who are going to shell out almost the same amount of money just buried into the general fund instead of in an override, and for a much inferior ending product. So I just think that I'm not alone in being confronted by these people, and there's certainly a collection of people out there who, again, going as far back as West Parish, as far back as Fuller, are going to say, I don't like this project because it's a continuation of these previous decisions. And I guess what I try and tell these people is, you and I can both agree we didn't like a decision that was made, but not doing this doesn't fix that decision, and now puts us on the side of making the wrong decision going forward. So, you don't have to like how we got here. If you're one of the people who doesn't like how we got here, we are still here. And the best thing going forward is this school. And so I think there's a lot of what you had in your presentation that speaks to most of the people. There's a not insignificant portion of people you'll want to vote who, again, may see this as a misplaced referendum on decisions that have been made previously. And it really needs to be focused on, short of getting a time machine, we can't undo something. So going forward, what is the best path forward, school or no school? And school is the best path forward, regardless of what you think about previous, decisions.
Yeah.
Kathy?
I just want to also say that school versus no school, at this point in a community, in a society who built all their schools, all 5 elementary schools with the short amount of time, they ultimately, they had to be replaced back then. So why didn't people then say, oh, keep the little schoolhouses and just keep patching them and whatever? That generation did not do that. That generation stepped up for the families and the kids in the community at that time, because that's what you do. You have to rebuild certain public buildings that have extensive use. We're no different. Our school buildings are not historic buildings. They are living, breathing, used buildings. So if it wasn't this East Gloucester project, it would be another school that needs to be done. They all need to be done because they were all built at the same time. We're trying to do it in this phased approach, and hopefully this will pass to get us through, to get more kids in a new facility. So hopefully we can all do a good job of communicating why this is the right solution and why it's such a benefit, not just to families that are actually going to send their kids, but to all of us who take pride in our community and take pride and care about the future of all the kids that are coming in the future.
And like you said too, buildings in Gloucester, look at our fire department. Our fire department trucks don't fit in the fire department anymore. Those departments were built years ago. Now they have to make certain turns and stop traffic and get in with only inches to spare. Times change, buildings change, wear and tear. To compare it to a home, people are remodeling their homes. They're doing everything open space instead of taking all the walls down. Things change. Go ahead, Sam. You have a question?
Well, just back to Kathy's point. Back to Kathy's point, all of those old neighborhood schools, they were reused, but not for schools. They were used for condos or housing, and so they weren't well suited for schools anymore. And they were architecturally worth sort of saving to make into something else, but not schools. So, here we are making the same decision that was sort of made in the 40s. So just to highlight that point a little more.
Anyone else? Kathy, there's a couple motions that came out of BNF. Do you want to continue on with your report and do the motions as you speak to them, or
Sure.
whatever you feel comfortable?
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
Thanks.
Okay, so as background, I don't know if we've talked about it extensively at the full school committee, but the transportation department has been having a tough time recruiting bus drivers, in particular this last year because of retirements and one person who left. So they have been trying everything to try to attract people to this delightful job of driving happy kids, smiling kids every day. And we have a new transportation director, and he has put forth a recruitment plan, which is in our packet. We know we need to do something more to attract people to come and want this position with our schools. And maybe it's just, getting the message out that it really is probably a pretty rewarding job for people that have the flexibility and maybe need, something in their retirement or in their spare time. So with that said, I will, Melissa, do you want me to make the motion before
Yes.
People ask? Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll discuss it during discussion.
Okay, so the Building and Finance unanimously recommended to the full committee to approve the school bus driver comprehensive recruitment plan as presented at our subcommittee meeting on July 15th, 2020. And I so move.
So we
Second.
have a motion and a second. Discussion. Does anyone have any questions about what was in our packet tonight and what's before us and any reasons why? No. Are we ready to move the vote? Yes. Maria, can you do a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Prince.
Yes. Okay. The next item is the transfer, Kathy?
Yes, as background, the district has been buying all sorts of personal protective equipment and supplies related to keeping our, updating our buildings to have all the supplies it needs to deal with the virus. In order to spend that money, we have to have funds sitting in a budget line item in the computer system. So this next motion has to do with moving money from our main office contingency to a line item for supplies, for those supplies to be spent, to be purchased. But those are all part of what is being submitted for reimbursement from the various grants that are out there. So this is just a temporary way of getting those expenditures to be able to be made. And then they will be submitted for reimbursement, and hopefully all of our expenses this coming year will be reimbursed from either the federal or the state. So the Building and Finance Subcommittee unanimously recommended to the full committee to authorize the CFO to transfer $100,000 from the main office contingency account to the business office supplies account for COVID-19 related items, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and Joel second. Is there any discussion? I think we were all at BNF and heard the reasoning. Ray, can you do a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Prince.
Yes. Kathy, is there any more to your report? Are you all set?
That is the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next item for business is the resolution for the state and federal legislature concerning school funding for COVID-19 that was presented by Mr. Lee. I'm going to read it very quickly, just so that we're all clear on what we are considering tonight to support and possibly send to our legislators. So the resolution in support of the education funding in the COVID-19 era, acted upon and supported by the Gloucester School Committee. Whereas the Massachusetts legislature and governor enacted the Student Opportunity Act in 2019 because the state school funding formula was out of date and failed to provide all students with the education to which they are constitutionally entitled. And whereas inadequacy in funding was felt most deeply in school districts such as Gloucester, serving high concentrations of low-income students, English learners, and students with disabilities. And whereas the Student Opportunity Act requires phasing in new funding formulas to provide greater resources for all school districts, with the largest share going to low-income districts. And whereas our students' needs are even greater now, after public schools and colleges were shut down in mid-March in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And whereas in the upcoming academic year, many students will need enhanced educational opportunities, technology, social emotional health and guidance services. And whereas the need for the additional services exists in every school district and is greatest in the school districts that would receive the largest share of new funding under the Student Opportunity Act. And whereas the federal, state, and local governments share responsibility for making sure all students receive the education to which they are constitutionally entitled. Whereas if schools are to reopen this fall in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, it is the responsibility of each school district to do so safely and responsibly. And whereas it is the responsibility of the state to ensure that each school district is able to pay for the enormous additional staffing, transportation, and material expenses required to do this. And whereas the state cannot expect mandatory COVID-19 safety guidelines to be followed without also ensuring that each school district has the funds required to implement these guidelines, and therefore it be resolved that the Gloucester School Committee support the following. Congress should approve New Deal level funding for state and local governments in the response to the economic crisis caused by this pandemic, raising revenues progressively and necessarily to ensure that they can fulfill their obligations to educate our students. The Massachusetts legislature and Governor Charlie Baker should fund public education, pre-K through higher education, at the level needed to maintain current staffing and services, fully fund the first year of the Student Opportunity Act, and enable students in our state's economy to thrive as we begin recovering from this pandemic. Our city should maintain its or their commitment to fully fund our public schools as the Commonwealth and federal aid step up to help to share unexpected costs during and from the COVID-19 pandemic, and that the Commonwealth must guarantee every school district full reimbursement for whatever COVID-19 expenses are required to follow state mandates. We must ensure a statewide school reopening is safe, responsible, and equitable. There can be no unfunded mandates for the COVID-19. When we vote on this tonight, if we approve it, it will be sent to Senator Bruce Tarr, Representative Ann Margaret Ferranti, State President Karen Fischler, House Speaker Robert DeLeo, Education Secretary Pius, Governor Charlie Baker, U.S. Congress Seth Moulton, U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren, and U.S. Senator Edward Markey. So that is what is up for consideration tonight. Does anyone have any questions, or are we ready to put a motion forward if someone would like to do so?
I'll put a motion forward. I move that we approve the resolution in support of education funding in the COVID-19 era.
Second. Melissa, you're muted.
Thank you, appreciate it. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Laura, and then Kathy?
Just reading through it, I know when Eric had initially raised it, he said there was overlap in what we had already approved that came from school committees. I see some of the differences being that we're also calling on the federal government to pass New Deal level funding. I'm wondering on, I just putting it out there, I mean, what is the appropriateness of our calling on the federal government to approve New Deal funding, and what is our actual goal of that? It's an open question. I really don't have an answer, but I'm wondering if anyone has an answer to that.
So are you asking if we should be requesting federal funding? Is that how I'm interpreting your question?
We're not requesting federal funding. We're asking Congress. We're supporting Congress passing legislation that is
Yep.
not currently being considered. So I'm just, I see it as a school committee that we call appropriately to the state. I'm not sure. I'm honestly just not sure what the appropriateness is of calling on something from the federal government in this context. I don't know if anyone has an answer to that.
The fact that Seth Moulton, Elizabeth Warren, and Ed Markey, I mean, they advocate for the state of Massachusetts. You know, those are funds that we pay into. So we're just essentially asking for the funds that we pay to the federal government to come back at us to help us educate our kids. I mean, we have a federal government coming out strongly saying we have to open regardless of what conditions there are. So I don't see a concern about asking. I mean, just because we're city officials that often respond to the state, I don't see us having a limitation to not request federal funds because we have federal mandates that come out at us. You know, Kathy?
Melissa, I agree with you for sure. And I think passing these resolutions is our way of really advocating in a very formal way. I mean, we've taken positions on things or we've talked about things in the past, and we don't, you know, we've passed resolutions in very specific cases because of the level at which we want it paid attention to. It becomes more official, I believe, and stronger if we vote on it as a body. I also wanted to point out that there was an excellent letter in the Globe a couple days ago by probably 5 or 6 school committee members from various communities about this topic, about how can we possibly, you know, we're sending our kids, but there's expenses, and therefore, you know, we understand there, and their whole big, one of their points was the discrepancy between the wealthy communities and those that don't have the resources. And I think this is what elevates that to say, this pandemic is nobody's fault, but this is why we pay taxes. And this is when we need emergency funding, because it really is nobody's fault, but we've put money into our federal and state banks by putting in our taxes, and we need it back for our kids.
Can I ask another question? Thank you both.
Absolutely.
That's very helpful. Who authored this? Where did it? I mean, I know Eric brought it to us, but I just don't know where it came from.
I honestly don't know. I mean, I know it was explained to us, but when Eric first presented it to us, I just don't remember what his answer was. I mean, because I think he said other school committees have signed on to it. So obviously it's something that is circulating through other school committees.
Eric has his hand up, so maybe he.
Oh, okay. Hold on, let me promote him. Eric, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. I just unmuted myself. And thank you very much for taking this up here and having the consideration as well. Ms. Wiesen, this is no different than what currently is before the Senate and before what has been passed as far as the HEROES Act. It's no different than any of the funding that currently will pass. This is going to pass inside of Congress here. It is irresponsible for the federal government not to provide funding for this. So I hear your concern in some of the wording here, but in current news here, the House has already passed this and the Senate is coming up with whatever contingencies will be placed there, but there will be massive aid coming to the states. And I think it is a responsibility of not only every educator, every taxpayer, and every school committee as well to go ahead and to have an advocacy role. It will make your job easier. It will make the taxpayer's job easier, and it will show your support for that. As far as the authoring of it, then it is a combination of what came from the school committees, your association, the MTA, other thoughtful stakeholders that were involved in this. And I tried to tailor it to include so that it wasn't one particular bill. It was just in general, the idea that we were reaching out. These are unheard of circumstances as well. And I cannot express how much I appreciate. I've attended some of the building and finance meetings and hearing, the efforts that are going on and the expenses that are involved in this. And realistically here, if we have a government that has bailed out other industries as well, and if we care for our students, which I know you all do, this is the time here where asking for that money. So I feel if we're asking for it, if you guys are asking for it, and every one of those members that is listed there has already come out in favor of this. So it to ask Senator Warren and to ask Senator Markey for these type of funds here, it's not even an issue. Our big question will be how will it be handled by the conservative senators as well, and what they view as where the money should be going towards. But I thank you for that. I hope that helps give clarity.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to remind everybody, we have a president and a secretary of education on the federal level or the state level, saying that schools that don't open aren't going to get any funds. Students that don't go back to in-class classrooms aren't going to get funds. I mean, that threat's been stated several times. So I think it's completely appropriate to reach out to our federal representatives who care deeply about us. We've had Mr. Markey at several inaugurations in the past 12 years. I think he's been to at least 2 of them since I've been here. So he clearly has an interest in our city and our schools. So I think it's appropriate to go back to your question, Laura, about reaching out for federal funds. I mean, the federal funds are there, so let's ask for them, is how I see it. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? Okay, so we'll put it to vote. Maria, can you do a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Prince.
Yes. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Lee.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much for all of you.
Okay, our next order of business is school committee letter to legislation regarding Article 97 disposition. I'm going to ask that we table this matter. Jonathan is involved in this, and I had suggested to him that we wait till he comes back because he stated that it's not time sensitive. So that will probably kick over to our next meeting. Discussion, other communications, old and new business. Massachusetts School Building Authority project update. I don't know that there is an update. We heard a lot tonight about the school project, not necessarily updating what is current. To my understanding, there's a meeting with MSBA on Monday that's pretty important, but I don't know that the building committee has any updates at this point. I think we're just in the phases now of discussing it with MSBA. Am I correct, Kathy?
Yes, we haven't met to do any new business. We are getting the schematic design submission in a format that can be uploaded to the website. So we're waiting for that, and an update was posted both on the project website and on our school website in the past week. So
Thank you. Is there any other new business, Laura? And then Sam.
Yes, I just wanted to let the school committee know that we're moving forward with the Facebook, with the social media account. But we have a communications meeting on Friday where we're going to change a little bit of the language. We're going to discuss changing a little bit of the language to reflect that it is actually a group and not a page that will fit our needs best on Facebook.
So that's new business that will be coming before us, maybe probably at our next meeting, just to change some language, amend our current policy to reflect what's actually happening so that we can stay in compliance with our policy. The change was necessary.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you, Laura. Sam?
Yeah, thank you. So I just wanted to follow up. I sent a quick note to everybody on the committee and the administration about interpreter services. So I just wanted to follow up with that. And I did get some information from Melissa Diamond at Wellspring. They use Language Line, which is something that can be used via the phone and also via an iPad. So it would be, I would like to just sort of learn more about what our interpreter services looks like outside of in person, and maybe just get a report from the administration about maybe how they might implement some new services with funding. Should be coming our way, hopefully.
Thank you, Sam. Go ahead.
So I'm meeting with Chris Castle tomorrow, and I'll ask her. I'm asking her about translation in a variety of ways, but I'll also ask about interpreter services over the phone and find out what we're doing now and report back to the committee.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. I think Greg Bark too. We've had conversations in the past, Ben, about how much of a struggle it is to get interpretation services. I think that's a process that's come a long way. Someone I use interpreter services every day at my work via telephone, or before COVID, they used to come into the building. And I had always expressed a hope that the school could get latched onto something like that. And it sounds like what Sam is talking about is that same type of process, which is extremely helpful and very easy to use.
Yeah, and the iPad video translator is really, really, really helpful because there's so many languages that you can access, and it's way more personable than just on the phone. And the other piece of it that I know there's an interest in is figuring out how we can share this type of service across city-wide organizations, because there are costs. I know there's an interest from other community organizations, and there's definitely a need because what I've heard is that it's easy to get sort of Portuguese and Spanish translators in person, but those sort of harder to access languages, Mandarin, Farsi, that are coming up more and more, these community organizations and our schools really need to have quick access to best support our community members. So the more that we can talk about it, the better.
Great. And was there a specific, I know you described different ways it can be done. Did you name a specific service that you and Ms. Diamond talked about?
Yeah, it's called Language Line.
Okay, great.
I don't know. It looks like this is what we used at the hospital. They look like little IV stands with an iPad. So the person's head is sort of on the iPad and you can wheel it around. So it's really nice because you can bring it into classrooms or into a meeting. It's really flexible. So you would only really need one per building to really get the best access out of it.
Great. Okay, super. So I'll find out what we're doing now on a variety of levels, and then also mention that service to Chris Castle
Great.
as well.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thanks.
Anyone else have any new business? No? So before we close, just wanted to remind people of upcoming meetings. July 24th, Gloucester School Committee Ad Hoc Communication Subcommittee at 4 o'clock. Yes, Friday, 4 o'clock meeting, yay. School committee meeting, August 12th. It sounds like we're probably going to have another school committee meeting prior to that, around the 5th, to hear the opening plan. Wednesday, August 19th is the next BNF meeting subcommittee, and then a school committee meeting again on August 26th. And I'm sure we'll probably be having additional meetings in between with all that's going on. Sam, did you have a question?
Kathy, are there any more building committee meetings coming up before sort of the votes with MSBA?
Nothing is on the calendar. They tend to schedule them when there's something that comes up, particularly right now because they made the big submission. So I don't know. There's nothing on the calendar right now.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
What we're trying to do is make sure that we have any meetings that are scheduled, even if they're not actually on the official calendar yet, but if they're intended to be scheduled on this list. So if as subcommittee chairs, either as you make a schedule for the year in terms of if it's a certain day of the month, or if you're something is coming up in 3 weeks or 2 weeks, even if it isn't officially on the calendar, on the city calendar yet, and it hasn't been posted, if we can get it here just so the committee can see what's coming ahead, is what we like to do.
And is it appropriate, even if we're not on a subcommittee, for us to get the panelist link for all of them, including the building committee, just so that we don't have to sort of interrupt a meeting to move from attendee to panelist? Does that make sense?
Up to the building committee?
Just in general. So so for example, I'm not a member of the BNF meeting, and I don't always get a panelist link, so I have to.
Oh, you don't? Okay, I thought you did. Because I know when I schedule meetings, I invite everybody.
Yeah, so I think it just sort of depends. And the same thing with the building committee. So just as a heads up, that if maybe we could just all get a panelist link, just so that we don't.
So I think Maria's on, and Maria schedules a meeting. So for our school committee meetings, I'm sure that's not a problem. The building committee, that's a city committee. So I don't know.
We're not really members of that committee.
You what?
So we're not really members of that committee, so I don't know if it'd be.
Yeah, we're not members of that. Yeah.
Panelists.
So my guess is Maria can schedule panelists for all of us, so that we have to act as non-members even though we're panelists.
Right.
But I'm sure that's not a problem. It's actually easier just to invite everybody than pick and choose.
I will do that going
Maria,
forward.
is that? Okay,
Yep.
excellent.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn? Laura got locked out. She fell out and can't get back in, she said. So, good night, Laura.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Maria, can you do the final roll call?
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Prince.
Yes. Thank you all. Have a great night. Appreciate
Good
it.
night, everyone.